It's often that shonen manga have some sort of power scaling integrated into the story, not for the purposes of a versus battle, but as a narrative tool that can help the author establish the idea of where a character stands within the hierarchy of their verse, or to show how much a character has progressed within their story. Blue Lock as a shonen has what I would consider some of the most satisfying power scaling and character growth that I've read in a long time, which is surprising to say since it is a sports manga. Feats, statements, and even multiple ranking systems around assessing the character's current positions relative to their peers, with the most important overlapping metric scoring the most goals. It's all there, but what I mean by satisfying is that each character's progression is obtained through their own merit and it all feels earned. In today's video, I'll be going over some of the power scaling within Blue Lock, and I'll be covering events from the start of the series until the end of the Blue Lock vs U20 match. The Neo Egotist League arc is still ongoing, and even though there is plenty to talk about, I'd like to wait until that arc is complete. I'll be focusing specifically from the perspective of the main protagonist, Isagiyoichi, since he has one of, if not the most drastic growths in the series. The 300 high school students that are invited into the Blue Lock program are considered by Jinpachi Ego, the director of Blue Lock, to be the best strikers in Japan under the age of 18. Upon arriving at Blue Lock, each player is given a uniform with a number ranking them from 1 through 300, or so they're told. Any player eliminated while participating in Blue Lock forfeits the right to play soccer at a professional level. Ego does claim that this initial ranking is based solely on his personal judgment to quantify their abilities. After the introductory game of tag, 25 players were eliminated, thus making the ranks 1 through 275, so in reality, rankings didn't change. Isagi, right from the start, was ranked as the second worst player at number 274, and was placed in Team Z with the 11 weakest players in Blue Lock. The rankings don't exactly matter, at least within the first selection, because the entire point was to give the teams in each separate wing agency by making them believe that they were the weakest teams in all of Blue Lock. Ego, being the mastermind behind Blue Lock, designed each selection in such a way that it would teach each player how to play soccer starting from zero. Starting with the first selection, which was a round-robin tournament between the 5 teams of each wing, it was designed to teach the players the following concepts: turning 0 to 1, personal weapons, awakening, and the goal formula. Each of these concepts would be the seeds that allow each player to grow as strikers. Now, Isagi isn't an exceptional player by any means. He not only lacks the capability to use any of the concepts I just listed, but he doesn't have any physical traits that sets him apart from any of the other players. His jumping height and stamina, for example, are weaker than his teammates. He doesn't have any weapons, he can immediately call his own, and he's currently incapable of turning 0 into 1. Isagi's even told that he's not cut out to be a striker if he loses his nerve in front of a goal. What sets him apart from the others isn't something that's immediately noticeable. It's his eyes and brain. From his first match against Team X to his last match against Team V, Isagi is able to understand and apply the concepts that Ego presented to the strikers. Against Team X, he learned what turning 0 into 1 meant. By having someone who can score a point or turn 0 into 1, it then creates a scenario where other players are now forming a strategy around that 1, thus creating a new team. After their match against Team Y, Isagi learns that his spatial awareness is his weapon, one that allows him to view the entire field at once as if he were looking down like God, as described by his teammate Chigi. It's through this weapon that he begins to develop his abilities, since he doesn't necessarily fight with sheer physical prowess like some of his other teammates. In their last match against Team V, Isagi goes through an awakening and develops his own goal formula by combining the direct shot with his spatial awareness. Ego describes awakening as learning that can only occur under extreme circumstances. By utilizing everything one has learned through trial and error and facing a challenge, the player will learn who they truly are and create a new formula that will let them seize victory. It's in the first selection that we meet characters like Nagi and Baro, who are monsters in comparison to the rest of the players in Room 5. These two are easily the strongest players in the first selection, both being perfect examples of either consistent hard work or natural talent. Baro already came into Blue Lock with an established goal formula and strong charging power. Nagi, on the other hand, only had 6 months of experience prior to entering bluelock, and yet his perfect ball control and ability to breathe life into plays results in him making some of the most insane goals in all of bluelock. Chigiri is also worth mentioning since he is the fastest player in all of bluelock in terms of top speed. He's considered almost a necessary asset in many of his matches since his speed has been capable of consistently breaking through his opponent's defense. Moving on, the second selection is designed to filter out the players that have survived by riding on their teammates' coattails. Having a goal formula and being capable of replicating it on their own is the only way that they will manage to advance to the next stage. The first stage is a solo match between the strikers and a bluelock man, where the strikers have to score 100 goals in 90 minutes with the difficulty increasing after a certain amount of goals. Isagi realizes as the difficulty of the first stage ramps up that while he is more capable now, he was able to score goals because his teammates were there to help him. He refines his goal formula by realizing the importance of positioning and impact, and afterwards is ranked number 15 out of the remaining 125 players. He joins up with Nagi and Bachira and faces off against the top 3 players of bluelock, one of which would later become his rival, Hitoshi Rin. Even with a prodigy like Nagi, who had given Isagi's team so much trouble during the first selection, Rin says that their current level is so mediocre he could die. He then scores goals back-to-back from kickoff and from the corner. Isagi learns very quickly that the only person controlling the field was Rin and not him. He couldn't fathom the difference between Rin and himself. After a massive defeat and losing Bachira, Nagi tells Isagi that he can't do anything without Bachira and realizes that what is being tested is individual strength. It's obvious that the key to clearing the second selection is winning one-on-one. With one loss away from being eliminated, Isagi's next goal is to become capable enough to beat Baro one-on-one. Naruhaya, one of Isagi's old teammates from Team Z, comments that the two of them are one and the same, both having 2 monsters for teammates and both being in a situation where they wouldn't get picked if their team loses. During training, Nagi shows concern and mentions that Isagi isn't even worth training against. Nagi and Baro seem to be at least relative to one another in terms of their skills since they are able to go back and forth in terms of scoring, especially after Nagi evolves in the middle of their match and develops a reproducible formula to win one-on-one. Naruhaya tells Isagi that he's not someone who can fight alone and that he's not a prodigy like Nagi and Baro. This has Isagi frustrated since he can't even beat Naruhaya, who up until this point in the series has done virtually nothing. Through this match, Isagi goes through another awakening and devours Naruhaya's blind spot weapon, making it his own so he can beat Baro one-on-one. Following the third stage of the second selection, Isagi understands what Naruhaya meant when he called him an adaptability genius. Their match against Isagi's former teammates Kunigami, Chigiri, and Nagi's former teammate Ryo starts off rough because of Baro's inability to support anyone's goals but his own. While he is a good player, Baro lives under the philosophy that he is king and the leading actor. His lack of passing and team play forces Isagi to reframe his thinking about adaptability, and doing so realizes that instead of working with Baro, he would simply devour him. Using him as bait, Isagi is finally able to start scoring and has even surpassed Baro to the point where he tells him not to get in their way. This is what makes Isagi such a dangerous player. He doesn't need to change other players, he changes himself. This simple rework pushes him to become a player that, while still physically weaker, he can compete with and even outperform a player as strong as Baro during this match. Before their final game in the fourth stage, Nagi tells Isagi that he wants to take on Rin since he's ranked number 1. Bachira says that Isagi is even better at using his eyes since their last match, and even thinks to himself that the combination of Isagi and Baro's anti-combo, Nagi's trap and pass, and Chigiri's speed formed a chemical reaction that they've polished to defeat Rin's team. Isagi notes that Rin doesn't need to create a chemical reaction because he is a next level monster who can create infinite possibilities all by himself. While the rest of the team wonders how Rin can even make plays like that, Isagi is the only one that can follow Rin and explain his plays and basic approach. Nagi also points out that both Isagi and Rin are on the same level in terms of vision, but Isagi loses because he can't measure up to Rin's physical abilities. After getting Rin annoyingly fired up, he starts to show what makes him such an exceptional player. Isagi figures out the essence of Rin's plays, which is to completely control his opponent's thinking. However, once he got serious, he started to control the entire field by manipulating his allies and enemies like a puppet master. This makes him wonder if it's even possible to devour someone like Rin. Nagi mentions that if they keep sticking to lane plays, they won't be able to overcome Rin's visualization. Isagi concludes that by believing in Rin, he could develop a way of countering him. Unfortunately, Isagi's team loses, and he learns that what separates him and Rin is nothing more than luck, and now needs to integrate that new piece into his brain. Between the second and third selection, the surviving teams had to play against 5 World All-Stars. The chemical reaction created by Isagi, Bachira, and Rin allowed them to score their first and only point. The All-Stars absolutely pulverize the Blue Lock team and give the players an idea of how far they are from the world-class pros. After Ego announces that Blue Lock will participate in a special send-off match against the U20 Japan team, he states that as they are now, the Blue Lock players can turn Japanese soccer on its head. The top 6 players that the Blue Lock team will focus around are Rin, Shido, Karasu, Otoya, Yukimiya, and Nagi, with Bachira being regarded as number 7 and Isagi thinking to himself that they are still above him. In the Team A versus Team B match, Karasu analyzes Team A and comes to the conclusion that Isagi is his team's weakest link. While surrounded by his special allies, Isagi is able to increase his abilities through synergy, but on his own, he's mediocre. He still can't win one-on-one, and he's being completely shut down by Karasu, while alternatively, Rin is capable of both scoring and winning one-on-one against Karasu. After failing to score and helping Rin score another point, Isagi gets some advice from Hiyori about thinking reflexively, and doing so, Isagi is able to reframe his way of thinking once again and applies it to his game plan. Doing so, he was able to surpass Rin and Shido to score the final point necessary to win their match and get a taste of the trance state that would eventually be known as Metavision. This ultimately earns him the final spot in the Blue Lock 11 team as Rin's optimal partner. They also learn Itoshi Sae, Rin's older brother and one of the new generation World 11, is going to be in the U20 team. The Blue Lock players are put into a final training camp before the U20 game, and Ego explains the concept of flow. He says that by the end of the training camp, Blue Lock will demolish the status quo of Japanese soccer. When the match finally starts, the Blue Lock players immediately notice that the U20 team has an exceptionally strong defense. Isagi says that Oliver Aiku, their captain, has terrifying physical abilities along with spatial awareness, and wonders just how good he really is. Compared to the defense he's played up against until that point, Aiku was on another level and is a real defender. As soon as the ball gets to Itoshi Sae, it becomes clear that he's the strongest player on the field. He uses an offensive counterattack that both starts and ends with him in possession of the ball and sets it up for a goal, although Sendo, the striker of the U20 team, isn't capable of responding. Sae is even capable of scoring off a loose ball with an extremely precise angle. He tells the U20 team he could have scored 3 times but held back to give them some time. He boldly claims that anyone with less scoring power than a midfielder like him doesn't deserve to be called a striker. Even Rin, who has been consistently considered Blue Lock's #1 player, could barely manage to keep up, and Sae says that his little brother can never surpass him. As Isagi gets a hold of the ball and plans to counterattack, he visualizes a play that can get him to score. However, he didn't input Sae as part of his calculations, and his entire play was nearly destroyed, going as far as to say that against Sae, his weapon is useless. Isagi even admits that after reflecting on that play, that Sae's skills are on a whole other league, and that it was only possible in the first place because of Rin's guidance on the field. Rin, on the other hand, admits that the last goal was created by Isagi and wonders when the game started to revolve around him. Isagi, by this point, seems to be playing on an equal level with Rin. Both players now look at each other and can only think about devouring one another and becoming the leading actor. Sae finally decided to get serious, leaving everyone else baffled, and even had Rin wondering how far his brother had flown. Rin awakens on the last counterattack and enters a trance that makes him challenge the entire defensive core of the U20 team one-on-one to destroy them. In the last minute, Sae goes for one final counterattack after Rin failed to score, but is stopped by his brother, and their one-on-one results in a failed shot that lands right in front of Isagi, who finally puts everything he's learned since coming to Blue Lock to score the winning goal. Sae tells Rin that he was wrong about Japan never being capable of producing a proper striker. He says that the person who will change Japanese soccer is Isagi. After the game is over, Isagi is asked for an interview where he claims that he will bring Japan a U20 World Cup victory. And after that, Rin declares Isagi his rival. I want to make one final note that when Naruhaya called Isagi an adaptability genius, he wasn't wrong. Throughout the entire series, Isagi proves time and time again that he is the self-improvement type. For an average soccer player who had nothing that even remotely separated him from his peers to a striker that could compete with one of the world's best soccer players under 20 is impressive to say the least. By destroying and then rebuilding himself with whatever knowledge he could integrate, his capabilities on the field improved drastically. He figured out almost every lesson Ego intended to teach the players and applied every single one of them to his game plan. Through his spatial awareness, he was able to analyze what exactly made the other players so strong both on and off the field, and has even developed rivalries with prodigies like Baro, Nagi, and especially Rin. I also want to add something interesting. If you look at the 4 goals scored by the Blue Lock team, Nagi, Rin, Baro, and Isagi were each responsible for a goal. This could imply that Isagi at this point in the series has finally caught up with these 4 monsters, and they're each playing at a relative level. He's evolved from the second worst player in Blue Lock to the man who will change Japanese soccer.